AITA for ghosting my fiancée after she called the police on me and lied? I just need a place to vent about what happened recently and to seek advice on how to move forward. Me, 28M, and my fiancée, 25F, got engaged 2 weeks ago. We've been together for 5 years now. 3 weeks ago, I came home from work exhausted. When I came home, I saw her and her friend Mike sitting at the dining table. I went over to my GF, kissed her on the cheek and dapped up Mike. I didn't really think too much about him being there since I know him really well and he's known my GF since they were little kids. I just asked him if he wanted a beer or something, but he refused, stating that he was here to talk to me. I was confused at first, but when I looked at their serious expressions, I knew it was something serious. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat at the table as well. They started talking about how close me and Mike were getting over the last few years and stuff. I just sat there flabbergasted. I didn't understand what they were trying to get at. I think me and Mike were sort of social buddies. If we were both attending the same social gathering, of course I'd hang out with him, but I never really hung out with him alone or made separate plans with him. I just told them to stop rambling and to get to the point. I was exhausted and really didn't want to beat around the bush any longer. My girlfriend asked me if it was okay if Mike could stay over for a few weeks since he recently got fired and evicted from his place. I told him, of course, he could stay as long as he didn't make a mess and contributed to the household like taking out the trash, etc. He got up, gave me a tight hug and thanked me. Little did I know this man was a filthy alcoholic. The first week things weren't that bad. He just kept to himself, did the chores I asked of him, and it was fun having someone in the house to watch basketball with. After that first week, things took a massive turn. I started seeing empty beer cans everywhere, his dirty socks stuffed into our couch and stuff. I confronted him about it, but he just apologized and told me it wouldn't happen again. I told my fiancée, but she told me to cut him some slack since he was going through a tough time and he would get better. It only got worse. I started seeing dried up vomit on our toilet seat, and that's when I suspected he was an alcoholic. I started seeing empty bottles of rum, whiskey, and vodka everywhere. I kept mentioning it to him, but he always gave the same response as before. My fiancée couldn't care less either, and that pissed me off even more. 5 days ago, I came home from work and my apartment reeked of alcohol. I just lost it. I stormed up to the guest room and found him drinking beer on the bed. I just went off on him. My girlfriend came over and tried to calm me down, but I didn't budge. I told him he had 2 days to clean my apartment and get out, otherwise I was going to call the cops on him. I guess he didn't like what I said one bit. He just got off the bed and charged at me. All I remember is him ramming me into the wall behind me and me hitting my head against a sharp object. The next thing I know, I see an officer pointing a flashlight at my face. I asked him where Mike was and he told me he was in a safe place where I couldn't hurt him. He and another cop grabbed me off the floor and dragged me outside. I saw my girlfriend and Mike talking to a cop. At this point, I'm fading in and out of consciousness. When she looked at me being escorted down the stairs like some rag doll, I wanted to tell her something, but my head just hurt too bad to form any sentence. I got put in the cop car and was driven to the station and put in a holding cell. I kept asking them why, all they responded with is the right to remain silent BS. I remember just sitting in the jail cell with my head feeling like it was going to explode any second while trying to make sense of what just happened. I remember dozing off and at some point being woken up by a cop. He told me I was lucky they didn't press charges on me and I was free to leave. My headache felt much better at this point so I could actually form a sentence. I asked him to explain to me what happened. They told me they received a phone call from my fiancée claiming I was drinking again and got really violent, and her friend had just subdued me to stop me from hurting her. I was so confused, like who was drinking and who got violent. He just told me the same story again. I was beyond pissed at this point. As soon as I got my phone back, I texted my dad to come pick me up and drive me to my apartment. He tried to pose questions as to why I spent the night in jail and I just told him to drive me home. I'll explain later. Once there, I just stormed upstairs to see if my front door was unlocked and to my surprise it was. My now ex-fiancée was sitting on the couch. I could tell she had been crying since her mascara was running down her face. She jumped up and tried to hug me, but I just pushed her off me and told her to get the hell out of my apartment. She tried begging and pleading, but I told her to shut it, pack a few essentials and get out. She left after begging a bit more. I immediately called off from work, claiming I had an injury and just got dispatched from the hospital. That whole day seemed like a fever dream to me. Nothing made sense. Why did my fiancée lie to the cops? That's all I thought about all day. She tried calling me a million times, but I kept ignoring it until I just couldn't hold back anymore. I picked up and told her to explain everything and not dare even think about lying to me. She ended up telling me that after Mike knocked me out, they both started to panic. She was scared of calling the cops on Mike since he was already on probation and this would probably end up destroying his life. She told me in the heat of the moment she made a stupid decision to claim that I tried to attack her and Mike protected her and accidentally knocked me out. Her reasoning being I could afford it since I didn't have a criminal record and Mike did. I didn't want to hear any more and just hung up. She texted me all kinds of apologies and tried to call many more times but I was done. After I started randomly throwing up, I went to the hospital the day after and found out I had a concussion and would be forced to stay home for the next month and beyond. Hurt by this, why would she choose her friend over me? Why did she try and ruin my life to try and save her friends? She tried coming over several times a day, but I never even dared to answer her. I've blocked her on everything, but today I got a text from her mom claiming she tried overdosing on painkillers yesterday and was in the hospital. All she wanted was to see me again. This has made me sort of regret ignoring her. I haven't responded to her mom or anyone for a fact. The only people besides those involved who know are my dad and mom. My mom is taking care of me ATM. I'm really conflicted. On the one hand, I feel like murdering her for what she did, but on the other hand I still love her and feel like she made a genuine mistake. I don't want to feel any more pain. My life is a mess, and by erasing the last 5 years of it probably would just make me end it all. I don't want to see the love of my life being buried over me ignoring her. I don't want to force my poor mother to be my free caretaker for a month. I feel like it's my fiancé's responsibility now. I'm so done with everything. I'm literally glued to a bed all day, and my laptop and phone are the only things keeping me sane. I start randomly getting panic attacks and shivering uncontrollably. Please, what should I do? AITA for ignoring her and making her suicidal? Should I allow her to come see me? Now next story. Am I the a-hole for ghosting my girlfriend after she nearly unived both of us? So, my girlfriend, 20 female, and I, 22 male, have been together for a little over 10 months now. We haven't had any heated arguments or fights, except for the fact that she keeps tickling me randomly, despite the fact that I've repeatedly told her to never do it again because I can act strangely to it, something from my childhood which I won't delve into now. To get to the current situation. This week I had my car returned from a paint job and some major look changes, and I was really satisfied with the results. So, I took a day off from work and took my girlfriend on a short trip outside the city. We drove to a lake, ate some food and relaxed for a couple of hours until it got pretty dark, and we decided to head back home to get some sleep as I had to go to work the next day and she had an exam. On the way home I started talking about how happy I felt with how the paint job turned out, and out of nowhere she starts tickling me. I pushed her hand away and told her to stop. Then she reached for my ribs with both hands and got me swerving off the road. Thankfully nobody was hurt, although my car got some deep scratches, but that doesn't even matter anymore as I had already slowed down after her first attempt to tickle me. I'll admit that I told her, "What the F*** is wrong with you?" as soon as we stepped out of the car, and she started crying, but I couldn't care less as I felt as if my veins were about to pop. When we got home I told her to pack her things and go to her best friend, but she threw a tantrum and begged me to forgive her for a little mistake. I didn't say a word, I simply stared in disgust and pointed to her luggage. After her friend picked her up I tried to go to sleep, but my mind was racing so I barely got any rest. This happened on Tuesday and she's been blowing up my phone ever since, but I haven't answered any calls or texts and just blocked her. This led to her friend coming to my house and telling me to at least hear my girlfriend out, but I've told her to F*** off and leave me alone, which made her tell me that I'm more in love with a car than with my girlfriend. So, am I the a-hole in this situation? Should I talk to my girlfriend? I already feel like I can't trust her after what happened and that our relationship can't be fixed. Update *. After reading nearly all the comments, I made the decision to send my ex a message where I told her we should meet face to face. Some people suggested that I should file for a lawsuit, but my ex is still in uni and her parents can barely afford helping her. She obviously did an insanely dumb stunt, but I don't want to punish her parents for it. The car is in the process of getting fixed, and I can afford it without major financial issues. Still, I took screenshots of her messages in order to have some proof in case the situation escalates. So, we met earlier at a coffee shop. She looked as if she'd been crying for a long time, but it didn't change my mind at all. What shocked me was the fact that she leaned in for a kiss when she saw me as if nothing happened. I stopped her and told her that we need to have a serious conversation. I explained that what happened wasn't because of the car itself, but because of her disrespecting my boundaries and not thinking for a second about what might happen if she did that thing. Besides that, I also felt disrespected by the fact that her best friend came knocking at my door to demand things, despite not having any rights to do so, which led me to ask my ex if she told her best friend the truth or if she lied about the situation. She said that she only told her friend that we had a small car crash and I'm mad at her. Hearing that made me feel disappointed, but I did my best to remain calm. I told her to tell the real story to her friends and family, and she raised her voice and told me that I'm accusing her of being a liar, something that led to a 15-minute discussion about how the crash was solely her fault and how she put our lives at risk. I asked her if everything's clear to her about our situation, and her response was, "Yep, 100%. Can we go home now?" That honestly shocked me. I told her that there's no way we can be back together, and I suggested she should be more careful and considerate with her future partner. Her reaction was all tears, shaking, begging me to reconsider my decision, but I just can't look at her the same. I explained again that for me, it wasn't a small mistake she made, it was a full-on stupid decision that shouldn't be done by an adult, as it could have resulted in something deadly. She just thinks I'm exaggerating, and this back-and-forth argument led to her asking if there's someone else in my life and I'm just using the accident as an excuse. I denied and told her that she's too selfish to even realize that she broke my trust and disrespects me by saying this. I left the coffee shop feeling like I'd been talking to a wall, but at least I can't say that I didn't try to have a conversation. An hour ago, her mom texted me asking what happened, and I told her everything. I said that I don't want any money from them, but the only thing I'm asking is for my ex to keep her distance from me. She apologized for what her daughter did and wished me all the best. As for her friend, from my understanding, she just came to my house without talking with my ex on whether she should do it or not, so I guess she just tried to be the main character in this whole story. Right now, I'm preparing for work, but my chest isn't heavy anymore. Now next story. Today I caught my wife of nearly 4 years cheating on me. My wife was going on a night out with one of her girlfriends. Her friend picked her up and they went into town. My wife forgot her key, so I needed to keep the back door unlocked. At 1 a.m., I sent her a text saying, "Don't be too late due to the door being open." No response. By 2:30 a.m. she still wasn't home. At this point I started calling her, but there was no answer. Fast forward to 8 a.m., 70 calls later, and still no sign of her. I was very worried at this point. Around 1 a.m., I had noticed a notification on her laptop, which she left on, but on the lock screen. It was a Facebook message from a random guy telling her what bar she was in. There were no further messages after that. This morning, she finally texted me to say she was at her friend's house. I then checked the laptop again and saw an exchange of messages between her and her friend. I couldn't see what my wife was saying, just the friend's responses. The friend was asking if my wife was home yet and when she would go home. Then the friend asked, "What is your story?" "I'll make sure I stick to it." They then planned the story about why my wife had to take a taxi home, with her friend saying, "Don't worry. For all he knows, you are here asleep in my spare room." After a few further messages, the best message of the lot was sent. So, how big was his dick then? I photographed all the messages. When my wife returned home, I played it cool like I didn't know what had gone on. She walked around the house acting like nothing was wrong. Eventually, I confronted her and showed her the messages. At first, she swore blind she was at her friend's house and that I could call her friend to check. Of course, they had already gotten their story straight. When I showed her the last message, she admitted she was at this guy's house, slept in his bed, but nothing happened. I calmly left the house, with her yelling at me to leave. 12 hours later, I am not speaking with her or responding to messages. She started saying she did nothing wrong and that I was the one throwing it all away. Apparently, me leaving was proof I never loved her. Now we are at the emotional blackmail stage. She's claiming she is heartbroken, along with her son, not mine. He's from a previous relationship. I feel she is trying to make me feel bad about leaving, like I should go running back to her. She broke my trust, and for me that's the end. She still swears nothing happened between them. I don't have solid evidence they slept together, but the evidence strongly points to it. She wants to talk like adults and sort things out. In all honesty, I don't even think this is the first time she has done this now that I know she's capable of it. I have zero intention of going back to her. I don't know what to do with myself. Update 1 asterisk I've had some requests for an update. There isn't much more to report. I'm still away from the house and we still have not spoken. I hear she still insists nothing happened, but I don't believe her. I spoke to her son last night. He was distraught. I spoke to him today and he is doing better. I also texted his dad to let him know. He sent a nice response thanking me for being in the kid's life and for everything I've done for him. Tomorrow I'll start looking for a solicitor. Update 2 asterisk after work, I needed to go to some shops at a local shopping park. When I returned, my wife was there in her friend's car, blocking my driver's door. She had the spare key and wouldn't allow me entry. After giving plenty of warnings, I called 101, police non-emergency line on her mother's advice, to report the incident. A few minutes later, the friend moved the car. My wife jumped in and wouldn't allow me entry. She started the engine, rolled the window down and shouted, "Nobody upsets my son. This is your fault. I'm going to smash the car up." She then drove off. I called 999 to report the car. It's still on finance in my name, registered in my name. An officer arrived and, after speaking with me, said it was a civil matter and no crime was committed. Her mother called to say my wife had returned home without the car. The officer went to question her, but she refused to say where it was. Nothing was done. I went out with a friend to search for the car. We heard a rumor it was in a car park in a small village 20 miles away. We drove there, but it wasn't. However, we spoke to a policeman from a different force who put out an ANPR check. The car was spotted 20 minutes after being taken, just outside our town. He said the other police force should have treated this as theft, and she should have been arrested. I didn't find the car, but tomorrow I'll speak with the police again to push further on the matter. Final update *. I had many supportive messages, so I'm sorry I didn't respond to all of them. After everything happened, I struggled. Depression set in and steadily got worse. My ex recognized my weakness and tried to lure me back to her. This nearly worked and I stupidly ended up sleeping with her a while back. That was a huge mistake which I regretted almost immediately. Knowing I was weak made my depression spiral further. I went to the doctor who diagnosed me with low mood depression. I started antidepressants which have helped massively. I've managed to get my head straight and started divorce proceedings. My ex is seeking spousal maintenance from me. She's trying to get me to agree to payments without a court order. I'm refusing this based on my lawyer's advice and insisting it goes through a court for my protection. Life is good now. I'm still living with my parents but looking for a place to move into. For the first time in a long time, I feel happy again. Everything is falling into place. I've met someone new and it feels exactly how a relationship should be. She's kind, caring, loving, and supportive. We share the same goals and it just feels right. Thank you to everyone who supported me. Your messages helped me through one of the darkest periods of my life. While there's more stress ahead, I know I can deal with it, especially with the amazing woman now by my side. Now next story. I canceled our wedding after my fiancé's outrageous demand left me stunned. Looking back now, it all seems like a bad dream. One of those slow, creeping nightmares where everything feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on why until it's too late. That's how it was with me and Lauren. I never thought I'd be the type of person who would break off an engagement right before the wedding. I always thought when you got engaged, it meant you were committed, that you'd figured it all out. But I hadn't. I'd been living in a fantasy, ignoring the warning signs, pretending everything was fine. Because after all, isn't that what you're supposed to do when you love someone? It wasn't that we didn't have problems, every couple does. But I convinced myself that our problems were small, manageable things we'd work through together. I was wrong. I had no idea how wrong I was until her demand came crashing down on me like a tidal wave, pulling me under and forcing me to confront the truth that I'd been avoiding for months. We had been together for 3 years. I remember how perfect everything felt at the beginning, how easy it was to be with her. We had met through mutual friends at a party, one of those situations where everything just clicked. I was immediately drawn to her confidence, her intelligence, the way she could command a room with just a smile. We spent the entire night talking, lost in conversation while the party went on around us. By the end of it, I knew I wanted to see her again, and I did. Our relationship progressed quickly, but it felt right. We were in love, deeply, or so I thought. Within a year we had moved in together. I remember the excitement of finding our first apartment, the thrill of starting a life together. It felt like everything was falling into place. We were young, successful, and happy. We talked about our future often, about the house we'd buy, the trips we'd take, and eventually the family we'd start together. I never doubted for a second that she was the one. So, when I proposed a year and a half into our relationship, it felt like the natural next step. She said yes, of course, and everything was perfect, for a while. Planning the wedding was stressful, as weddings often are, but we were managing, or at least I thought we were. Lauren was meticulous about the details, something I admired in her at first. She wanted everything to be perfect, and I was happy to let her take the lead. I trusted her judgment, believed in her vision. We agreed on most things, but there were a few areas where we didn't see eye to eye. Looking back now, those were the first cracks in the foundation, the first signs that something was wrong, though I didn't realize it at the time. It started with small things, the guest list, the venue, the color scheme. She was insistent on having a big wedding, something extravagant and over the top. I had imagined something more intimate, more personal. But I let it slide. After all, it was her day too, and I wanted her to be happy. That's what you do when you love someone, right? You compromise. You put their happiness above your own. But as the months went on, her demands became more and more extreme. She insisted on flying in a famous floral designer from New York, someone I'd never even heard of, but whose services cost more than I'd ever thought possible. She wanted custom-made invitations, imported linens, and a cake that looked more like a piece of modern art than something edible. Every decision seemed to be about appearances, about impressing our guests, about creating the kind of wedding that people would talk about for years. It wasn't about us anymore. It wasn't about our love or our commitment to each other. It was about her image, her desire to have the perfect day. But I kept my mouth shut, telling myself that it didn't matter, that as long as we ended up married, it was worth it. Then came the final demand, the one that shattered everything. We were sitting in our living room one night, going over the last-minute details for the wedding, which was only a month away at this point. I was exhausted, having spent the entire day fielding calls from vendors and trying to finalize the seating chart. But she seemed energized, more focused than I had ever seen her. She was talking about the rehearsal dinner, about how she wanted it to be a black tie event, when she suddenly dropped the bomb. "I've been thinking," she said, her tone casual, like she was discussing the weather. "I don't want your family to come to the wedding." At first, I didn't understand what she was saying. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, convinced she had to be joking. My family had been nothing but supportive of our relationship. They had welcomed her with open arms, treated her like one of their own. Why on earth would she want to exclude them? She must have seen the confusion on my face because she quickly explained, "It's not that I don't like them," she said, her voice smooth and reassuring as though she were trying to soften the blow. "But they don't really fit with the vibe I'm going for. You know how your mom can be a little overbearing. And your dad, well, he's nice but he's not exactly the most polished person. I just don't think they'd really add to the atmosphere." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart sank as the full weight of her words settled over me. She didn't want my family at my wedding, because they didn't fit the vibe. My family, who had loved me unconditionally, who had supported me through everything, who had been excited about this wedding from the moment we announced it, was being reduced to an inconvenience. Something to be hidden away to avoid embarrassment in front of her high society friends and colleagues. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be the woman I was about to marry. How could she be so shallow, so cruel? How could she even suggest something like that, knowing how much my family meant to me? But the more she talked, the more I realized that she was serious. She didn't see anything wrong with what she was asking. To her, this was just another detail to be sorted out, another decision to make in the pursuit of the perfect wedding. And the worst part? She genuinely believed I would go along with it, that I would choose her vision of the perfect day over my own family. Now next story.
Am I the jerk for telling my brother the truth on why I don't ask him for anything? I, 19F, have 3 brothers, 27, 28, and 32. My oldest brother, Dave, got married to Sarah in May. I study halfway across the world from my hometown where my family are. I got really sick a few months ago and rushed to the nearest hospital. Turns out they don't accept my insurance, and I had to pay out of pocket. I was €50 short and called everyone I could, but no one was picking up. I then called my oldest brother, Dave, because he always picks up, and asked him to send me €50. I said I would send it back once I got paid in a few days. He told me not to be ridiculous and said he didn't need me to pay him back. Sarah called me that night and asked how I was doing. After the chit-chat, she asked if I could ask someone else the next time I need money because my brother is a married man. I was shocked, but I apologized and said I offered to pay him back. She said it's fine, but next time I should plan my finances in advance, so I won't have to rely on a married man. It's my birthday soon, and Dave called to ask what I wanted. I said nothing and that I was fine, but I appreciated him asking. My other brother called to ask what I wanted, and I said I wanted some money to heat my apartment. I couldn't afford to heat it this month. He was baffled that I was so broke I couldn't afford heating, and I wasn't saying anything. He started tearing up on the phone call with me and ended the call, then sent me $500 later. I guess he told Dave about the call with me because Dave called me and started interrogating me on why I had just told him I didn't need anything, and then asked my youngest brother. He sounded offended and asked why I feel like I can't rely on him. I asked, "Haven't you spoken to Sarah about this?" He was confused about what I meant, and I told him about the conversation I had with Sarah after he sent me the €50 for the hospital. He said he'd call me back, but he hasn't. A cousin of mine sent me a message a few hours ago saying I was the jerk for meddling in their marriage and that Dave didn't owe me anything. I was like, when did I say Dave owes me anything? I have never relied on him for anything, nor do I plan on it. I feel bad that Dave and Sarah are fighting, and I can't help but feel weirded out that Sarah did that behind his back, and he had no clue. I've been extremely anxious, and I can't stop shaking. Am I the jerk? Again, I hope this reaches some of you. My middle brother called me yesterday and asked me to explain what's been going on, and I did. He's always had quite the temper and got very angry about the Sarah situation. He mentioned how Dave is paying the rent for Sarah's 22-year-old brother's apartment, so for Sarah to ask me not to ask Dave for anything at all was so messed up when her own brother is getting his rent paid every single month by Dave. To be honest, this made me mad. It's okay for Dave to support her brother, but God forbid he sends me €50 for an emergency, right? Anyway, Dave called me, and we had a heart-to-heart conversation. I explained to him what I've been going through here, and he was silent for a while. I mentioned that if I was in urgent need of something, I still had my other two brothers to ask, so it really wasn't that terrible. He said he feels so guilty that I was suffering and he didn't know. He said he won't tell me the details about his discussion with his wife, but he was heartbroken that she would even think of telling me not to rely on him. He has asked her to give me an apology, which she said she did, but at the time of the call, I hadn't received anything. I said I haven't gotten an apology from her, and he told me to check my messages again. Still nothing. He was silent for a while, and just sighed. I also mentioned the text my cousin sent, which he asked me to forward to him. He said he felt so bad that people so much older than me were treating me like this, and that he will deal with it so it never happens again. That was this morning. I got a message from Sarah 10 minutes ago. Not sure how that's meant to be an apology, but to summarize, she said, "I'm sorry if you took what I said, as you can't ever rely on your brother. Heck, your brother and I would never intentionally try to make you feel like he couldn't do anything for you. I'm also hurt that you couldn't speak to me. If you had a problem with it, we could have solved this as sisters. Now, WTF am I meant to say to that? I know she'll make me the villain if I don't respond, but honestly, what on earth is that?" Update. So, I mentioned this in a few comments, but for those who haven't seen it, Sarah has this secret Twitter account that I follow through a burner account. It doesn't have her picture or name, but I know it's her because my cousin tagged that account on Sarah's birthday saying, "Happy birthday." Even without that, her tweets made it obvious it was her. Anyway, she replied to a tweet of a woman who tweeted about how she has no in-laws because her husband is an orphan with no siblings, and Sarah replied saying, "Gosh, like I don't understand how you could love your partner and wish they had no family unless the family were genuinely toxic or something. I don't know, but this was a step too far in my opinion. She can dislike us all she wants, but tweeting this weird stuff is so childish and petty to me. You wish your man had no family because of an incident over €50? Someone get this lady some help." Anyway, I sent it to my other two brothers, not Dave, and one of them forwarded it to him. Long story short, Dave was staying with my other brother for a few days after that, and now he's moved back into his house, but Sarah is back in her hometown. Final update. Dave and Sarah are officially separated. He asked her to leave his home and said he'd rent her an apartment wherever she wants until they're officially divorced, after which point she'll have to pay for it herself. Dave told me he created a hole in the concrete of his house and stashed some valuables, including gold jewelry that belonged to me. Sarah stole about half the stuff that was in it. She admitted to selling some of the jewelry but promised to pay Dave back. Dave is working with a lawyer to sort everything out, including replacing my jewelry. There's no coming back from this for them. She turned out so much worse than I thought, and I can't even believe this story myself.